and live stream is starting now. Don't want to see this. So, talks of the evening. Our talk of the evening is Beware of Ducks, and it's about 60 minutes. Our speaker tonight is Gregor Woiwode. You can find him under Greg on that on Twitter and I think also on GitHub. And he is the CTO of co-IT.eu. Gregor is also a Google developer expert for Angular. He loves building tools that enable developers to be more productive. In his role as a speaker, trainer, and consultant, he teaches techniques to continuously improve the architectural design of Angular applications. And he also enjoys running or trying his hand at hobby cooking. But I will just give the moderation to Gregor now, because I'm pretty sure he can way better introduce and describe his talk tonight than I can do. So it's your turn.
Yeah, thank you so very much. I will immediately start sharing my screen. And thanks for the very complete introduction. No, I have nothing to add. Thank you so much. And yeah, also a warm welcome from my side on to everyone who has joined this evening. So yeah, thank you very much. It's past 7 and you're here to learn something about the open source library ngrx-ducks. And this evening will be like a journey through the past 2 years, because this library is not a new thing that is about to come up. It has quite of a journey behind it and is progressively enhancing itself over the years and becomes easier and easier. And I want to show this evening that I believe NGRX is a damn good platform to build Angular applications with. And I think with ngrx-ducks it becomes even better. So this evening we will start with the story behind ngrx-ducks and why I had the idea to build this library. And then we will see what ngrx-ducks is at all. So by introducing the API and the capabilities that ngrx-ducks has. I will also try to live code, so hopefully everything goes all right this evening. And after the introduction of the API, we will also learn about enhanced or advanced features of ngrx-ducks, because after having a solid core of the library, we started to provide even more features, making the life of the Angular developers even more easier. So yeah, so this was my introduction slide, but everything on it has already been said by Karina, so thank you very much. One thing that I want to add though is at co-IT we provide business consultancy to our customers, and after we agreed on a digital process we also implemented. So we make both our consultancy for our business customers and also software development and all other kinds of IT service management. And we are looking for new employees. So if you have the feeling in this talk that you say, oh, I also like building APIs and making life of developers more easier, then you can come to me, talk to me afterwards, or reaching out via Twitter. So and to get in touch with me or with our company. Yeah, let's start with ngrx-ducks, story time. I want to share a little story which has shown me in our project a little problem with ngrx when you use it for more than 2 years in a project, and the project becomes larger and larger and larger, and you also work on a bigger team using ngrx. By the way, it would be very interesting for me who already uses ngrx of you. So all of you can just type in the chat, I am using ngrx, or I have no idea what ngrx is. And with this feedback, I can calibrate a little bit better what I explain, and yeah, maybe something I can let out, for example. Okay, we have this meeting situation here, and one of our team members was in the daily meeting and said, wow, we implemented this new feature yesterday, and we are pretty sure to finish it today. And by the way, for all technicians here in the daily meeting, she said, we added new actions that are needed to implement all the stuff. And after a little pause, another team member said, oh, that's pretty nice of you that you have completed this feature, but we have implemented these actions already. So for those of you who are new to ngrx or Redux at all, actions is just a kind of an envelope or a messaging mechanism that we use in Redux. And yeah, actions are just plain objects, and it's like a communication contract that we use in Redux. So, okay, the problem was one team member has implemented a new thing, she thought, but it was already implemented. And all of these problems also occurred with other building blocks of Redux or ngrx. She said, hey, we added a new selector to select a certain state from the store. Or we implemented a new effect, and so on and so on. And the answer still remained the same, that someone in the team said, we have already implemented all this stuff. We maybe need to provide 1 or 2 parameters to make it configurable, but everything was there. And the main problem was that as the Redux application has grown, no one really knows what features the store already had. So it was a problem of discoverability when it comes to add new stuff to the store. And basically in Redux applications, so this is not tied to ngrx, it is the nature of the Redux architecture. It's getting harder and harder to keep track of the decentralized infrastructure of a Redux application. Decentralized infrastructure means that you have actions, reducers, effects, selectors, and all of those 4 components come together in the store, and then a component has to use all of those mechanisms. It's a quite decentralized infrastructure. The question is why it is really getting harder. You can see here a picture with the image of a store, right? You can imagine a Redux store, it's kind of a client-side database or a cache. So if you only think of a state, and inside of this database you have multiple tables, like where you manage the languages, the translation of your application, maybe customer data, user data, products data, or whatever you can imagine. From a Redux point of view, you have features. For example, you want to manage a user, and a user can have different aspects inside of an application. Maybe you want to track the login of a user, then you can implement some kind of a login journey or a registration journey he has to take. Maybe you want to store or cache user details, or you want to display a user menu. This means these features can be broken down into multiple slices. So we call this slices. You have a store can have features, and a feature can multiple slices. And for each slice, you need to implement the building blocks of Redux. And the building blocks are actions that you can dispatch. These are selectors, these are effects or reducers. And if you do this for each and every feature or slice, you end up with a lot of code and a lot of files you have to maintain. And these code files can also be split around several libraries or nested folder structures. So it becomes pretty hard to know what already has been implemented. So the complexity of your code base increases rapidly. Surprise. So what Redux does really well is breaking responsibilities down, right? So if you implement a reducer, you normally have very thin or small methods. Also in effect, if it only has one responsibility, is also very clean to read, but you have many of them, right? So this is the main problem. And this was the result of the meeting, that just one member has asked, so do you remember all the features that we have added previously to the store? And everyone has said, nope, we do not know exactly what we have implemented so far. And when I was in this meeting, I started to think about, okay, how can I improve this situation? So when I started implementing ngrx-ducks, everything was about raising the discoverability of all features that exist in the store and make them more accessible to the developers. So to increase developer experience. That was the idea. And the previous month, since ngrx-ducks now has a very solid state, I also came to another thing. This is infrastructure and simplicity. As I solve the problem with discoverability, and we will know in just a few minutes how we add more discoverability to a Redux store, I thought, okay, it would be nice to make it even simpler for a developer to spin up a state management application. Because this can also be pretty hard, right? We have lots of reducers. A reducer has to be registered in the store. It also has to be injected into the component so that the store can dispatch actions or that triggers reducers and so on. Redux is quite a complex infrastructure, or has a complex infrastructure there. So yeah, this question is for you. For all of you who already use ngrx, can you just tell me, or maybe also via audio, you can just unmute yourself, what is needed to get ngrx running in your application? It's quite
auf einmal.
So I came prepared. Oh yeah, so Ahmed says store actions reduces. That's completely right. So, and I start with the infrastructure or with the package aspect. So first, to get ngrx running, you need to install several packages. You normally have the ngrx store. You have ngrx effects that we use to handle asynchronous operations, and you may also need to install the store dev tools that allow you in your browser to keep track of your state changes. We will see this also today. So, and this is the first thing. So installing stuff is pretty easy, but then you need to keep track of all the building blocks. So you have an action creator called createAction that creates an action. You have to use the action in your reducer. You need to register that reducer in the store. Maybe you want to make your reducer type safe by using the action reducer map. And then you need to dispatch the action in the component, select state from the store, and to be able to select the state in the store, you need to create something that is called selectors. To handle asynchronous operations, we go with create effect. these are a lot of building blocks that we need to know to handle state operations in ngrx. So it's not less. So it's quite a bit that we have to learn about. Even though those building blocks like action reducer map are not that known in the community yet, or not fully used, and sometimes you get confused if someone writes this. An ngrx-ducks is all about bundling all of those complexity together and automate as many infrastructure as it can. So to get started with ngrx-ducks, we need to install one single package, and this is called ngrx-ducks/core, and then you're ready to go. And what does ngrx-ducks provides is an Angular way of building up an application with state management. So if it really does not matter if you know ngrx or if you know ngrx or not, this API should allow you to build a state management solution that works. Basically, what ngrx-ducks is, it handles all of your state it handles all of your state information, and ngrx-ducks provides you a more simple API to access those state, the state, and also mutate the state. So what does the decorator does? So we have a decorator called store facade. And the store facade takes a key called feature. And you can give you have to give your feature a name. In this case, I just call it counter for a simple counter example. And you have to pass some kind of default state information. So Redux says that you always have to have a valid state in your application. And inside of your defaults, you can provide the default values, the start values when the app starts. And this is in fact all you need to enhance the store of ngrx. You do not need to register anything or use some store module for feature or for root. It simply goes by this decorator. And I think this is a pretty easy API because the mental model of Angular also offers this way to go with, right? We already know the add component decorator, the pipe, the directive, the injectable decorator, and all of those also can take a configuration, and ngrx-ducks really does the same here. You can also add more type safety to your duck or to your store facade. The store facade decorator can take a generic parameter, and then you can type the defaults of your defaults or of your state information. This makes sure that you have no typos inside of it, and so on and so on. It's just a helper there. And now the really interesting part starts. After configuring a new part of the store of your state inside of your application, you introduce something that is an action and also a handler. So you have a method called createDuck, and this is where the name of the library comes from. And this createDuck method expects one mandatory parameter. This is the action type. This is the address of the envelope you have to write to send it somewhere. And this action type is the first parameter. And the second parameter is what we call a case reducer function. So you can read it like this: when an action with a type counter increase count is dispatched, please execute these handler method here, this arrow function here for me. And as you can see, this is a typical Redux case reducer function where you can destructure the state, mutate the state information, and then you can create the next state. So what we've learned now is that this function create-duck bundles an action and the corresponding mutation logic. And this follows the duck refactoring pattern. So if you have a look at ngrx-ducks.org, you will find this duck pattern as an official refactoring pattern that you can apply to your Redux applications. And there the idea originates from. Okay. And here is the usage of this store facade. You can see it's a simple service that you can inject to your component. And what you also can see is that normally your components have no idea that ngrx acts behind the scene. You can just work with this service and make all the stuff you can do with the store. And we will see that in a moment, I promise. And I want to demonstrate you in this first live coding session how this actually works. I have an Angular project with me and I already have installed, or maybe I make this a little larger. And I have already installed the packages, the mandatory packages that are needed, the store module of ngrx, the effects module, and also the store DevTools module to see to have a better knowledge of what's going on, that we can see it in the browser. And beside that, nothing is done in this Angular application yet. You can see we have an empty app component. And now I want to enhance the store module or the store of ngrx with you. Normally, if you do this in a live coding session, I believe this would take about 10 minutes. Because you have to create actions, the reducer file, then you need to register everything in the store. And I want to do it in less than 2 minutes. I want to create a directory first where I can just bundle everything that has something to do with the store. And I want to add something that is called store facade. And in here, I want to export a class that's called counter store facade. And I want to add another typo, store facade. And I want to add the decorator here as well. And you can see store facade decorator is imported from @ngrx-ducks core. I also provide our interface. This will be my counter state. These are the information that I want to manage in my store. And now I go ahead and give this part of the store a name. And this will be counter. And now I also want to provide some defaults. And here I want to add some type safety by adding the generic type operator. It's called counter state. Now you can see already that the type check kicks in, and that I'm now told by the compiler that I need to provide the valid state information here. After this, I want to add a handler, and I use the create-duck function. I prefix this with the feature name and say I want just to increase the count. And after this, I just make this a little bit smaller here. This as well. And here I will get the counter state that I want to mutate. And then I can say, all right, return state, and the count should be state.count +1. So Whenever I call this, or whenever I dispatch an action with the type increase, I will execute this function, and this function will just increase the count property by 1. So this is what I've added. I already started the Angular server, and we have here our normal application at localhost 4200. And you can see the dev tools are also in place. And you can see that the state is empty until now. This is because we do not use this service until now. And we can change this by using it maybe inside the app component TS. So here I want to use the constructor, and I say I want to use the counter. And here I inject the counter store facade. And when I go back to my browser, you can now see that ngrx internally recognized that a reducer was registered. And now you also can see that we have already a counter and a count property which is initialized with 0. So we have initialized our state with a feature and with the initial state. And everything of this just by using these few lines of code, and the decorator just does all the infrastructure for you behind the scenes. And I think that was quite quick to enhance an ngrx store without knowing anything about the infrastructure that ngrx really needs. Okay, so once again, the basic idea of ngrx-ducks is that we bundle all of the building blocks of ngrx together and to provide an easy API that every application developer can use. Let's have a deeper look at the ducks. But I see that there is a question in the chat. When mutating the state, we don't have to care about immutability. This is handled by ngrx-ducks. This is a great question. I will also come to this a little bit later on. You have to take care about immutability yet if you use create-duck. But I can also just tease a little bit. There is a function called create-mutable-duck. And with create-mutable-duck, you do not have to take care about immutable anymore. So this is one of the enhanced features. Maybe we also see this feature this evening. Okay. So I want that we have a look at the create-duck function a little bit deeper. A plain duck just requires really only one parameter, and this is the action type. And a duck has it's like two sides of a coin. You can use a duck as an action creator. This is what you know from ngrx with create action. This means, so if you have your component and you inject the facade, you can just go to the service, execute the function increase, and then you will receive the build action, the action object. You will receive it back. But, and this is the interesting part, you can also use a duck as a so-called self-dispatching action. The goal of ngrx-ducks is that you do not have to take care about this store service. So we go away from this general store service API, and we replace it entirely with our store facade. And you can do anything with the store facade that you also can do with the store, I promise you. And this self-dispatching action lives also of this increase property, and you can just chain it with a dot, and then you will have this dispatch action, and this allows you to dispatch the action. And this is what I meant with discoverability. If you continue adding action by action or duck by duck to your service, you will automatically receive via auto-completion every action that exists in your store facade. So you do not have to look up an actions file or something else to have a look at the actions. The service that you use already tells you what you can use. Next to the plain duck, there is the loaded duck. So you can define or you can require that the caller of this duck has to pass a payload with a certain type. Therefore, you can pass a helper function of ngrx-ducks called dispatch. And this dispatch is a generic helper, and you can type the payload of the action that is used later on. And you can see this a little bit below here. When you add the second parameter, ngrx-ducks automatically infers the type system for you and requires the caller to really pass this type to the method. So the API of ngrx-ducks is strictly type and you cannot misuse it. That's another goal of this library. And then you already have seen this now in the previous live coding. There's also a reducing duck that does not use this helper function dispatch, but you can just simply pass a reducer function to it, where you can mutate the state. If you just add a function like this that only takes the state, you can just dispatch it without passing any parameters. But if you add a second parameter to this arrow function and you require a payload, once again, ngrx-ducks will infer the type automatically for you and require the caller to provide the necessary parameter. And everything of this is done highly dynamically and automatically for you. So, summary to this. A duck ties together the action and the corresponding case reducer. And guess what? You will never see a create reducer function or something like this in ngrx-ducks, because the reducer function will be generated automatically of all ducks, right? So the store facade iterates over each duck and extracts the case reducer function and builds the whole reducer function automatically. The goal here is that you can really focus on the logic that is needed to do state mutation. And you do not have to do any maintenance in your actions or reducer functions anymore. And here is why everything of this works so seamlessly. The store facade decorator is the tool that I use to automate all the infrastructural problems or infrastructural tasks. The store facade produces a facade service. The naming is a little bit historical and it will change in the next major release because facade does not really fit here anymore, because ngrx-ducks has now many more features than just the facade, but for now it's called facade. What the store facade decorator does is it automatically connects the service to the store, because somehow it is necessary that we are able to dispatch an action. To create a self-dispatching action, we need to connect to a store, and the decorator store facade does this for us. It uses the IOC container of Angular and injects the store automatically so that we can just work with the store inside of our store facade service. Then the store facade itself is an injectable, so it will also register in the IOC container of Angular. Then the store facade decorator also generates the reducer function automatically. And this is quite a new thing. It's now for I think 1 month or so. We are able to automatically register the reducer function in the store. And this means that you do not need to have to do anything to register reducer functions anywhere. The only thing that you need to do is to inject the service into your component, and then you're fine. Yeah. Another critical thing, or another thing to remember, is a duck is really both. It is an action creator, and it is also a self-dispatching action that you can use right away. Okay, I talked a lot about this API, and now I want to show it a little bit to you. Therefore, we go to the app component, and the first thing that I want to do is to spin up a few buttons, maybe increase by 10 just to see this, and then I want to have a click handler here, and I just want to call the increase method of the component, and I have also another method called this way, and I have noticed that somehow my HTML tag was broken. Okay. So now let's implement those methods. So we have increase and we have increase by 10, right? Okay, let's start with the increase method. Increase will now use the existing method of the counter store facade. And as you can see, if I use just the method, autocompletion tells me that I receive a typed action. And this typed action is a pure vanilla ngrx action. This means ngrx-ducks is completely uses the types of ngrx itself to be compatible with the ngrx ecosystem. And then you have an additional function that is called dispatch. And this will just dispatch the action to the store. Let's prove it. Here are my buttons. I click increase, and you see in the DevTools that the action has been dispatched and that also the store has been mutated. So the handler is active and it works as you already know from ngrx. Now let's check another feature by the ducks. It's increase by. It's an increase by function, and here I want to also create a duck. I just copy this, increase by, and now I want to add a more complex case reducer by adding the payload, and I expect that the caller passes me the number that I just used to build the sum of the count. The case reducer is nearly the same, but instead of +1 I say plus payload. Okay, so I just added another parameter here basically, right? And then I just added it here, or I use it here in the calculation. And if we go back to our component, so component, app component, we now, and this is a very cool thing, I believe, we can just use auto-completion and it will tell us, hey, now you have the increase by functionality, now you can use the dispatch function, and now the TypeScript compiler complains because I have to pass the correct payload. This means you can really focus on your mutation logic in your facade. Everything else is just done for you automatically. And now we can go back to our application, press increase by 10. We see it's dispatched and we have this increase and increase by 10 functionality. Yeah. Okay, so when there are any questions, just write them in the chat. You can also show your appreciation if you like the idea, or maybe if you dislike the idea. I'm really happy to see or hear about your feedback to this. So the next feature is about the other building block of ngrx. It's called selectors. So we need selectors to query information from the store. And everyone who's into ngrx knows that you can select state from the store by using the select method on the store, and then you have to pass a selection method. And this selection method, the problem with the selection method itself is that you always need to know from where you want to import the selector method. So you need to know where it is. And I also thought about how we can support the developers here to have a better access to the store. So the next goal would be that we display the count of the counter, because not every of our customers have Redux DevTools installed, I think. All right, to do this, we need to create selectors. And I create a new file, counter.selectors. And here we do need to do one thing. First, we need to create some kind of a bookmark, right? Create feature counter. This means we want to jump to that part in the store where we store our counter information. And we receive the counter state. Oh, sorry. And create feature is the wrong method. It's called create feature selector. And counter state could not be found because I have not exported the interface here. So let's do this. So, okay, now I have imported the interface, but it just helps me a little bit to have a little bit more type support. And what I now want is to select the current count inside of my store. And therefore, I export our account constant and I create the feature. And the feature selector just reuses the feature counter. Here I receive the entire counter state, and now I just return the state. Oh, and I once again used the wrong method. Now it's just the selector and not the feature selector. So now it should be fine. And you can see, because I've typed it above, I now have also type support here, and I select the count of my store. So this is all ngrx. It's not has nothing to do with ngrx-ducks yet. So it's the query API to select information from the store.
There's also a question in the chat. The question is there a recommended project structure for big projects with ngrx-ducks?
There is no recommendation. It's pretty much the same like you see it already in larger Angular projects. So often you have a feature, and the feature has often a store directory, and I also used to use this structure to see where my state management is located. And then you can put everything that is located to this to the state management into this directory. And if you have bigger projects, you will find that you just have multiple libraries, and each library in its features also has this structure, but it's nearly the same like you see it in vanilla ngrx projects. Then there's another question. we will have store actions reducers per feature. I do not really understand this question. Per feature. But maybe I can just try to answer it the way I understand it. So the counter store facade by default provides you the possibility to just add this the state by a feature name. Correct. You have also the possibility to nest the structure a little bit more by use the slice property. So you can say my category is counter, and under counter I have another table, and therefore you can use the slice property. And to know how you can use this, you can just read the documentation. I have learned in my previous discussions that a lot of developers just go with feature and do not nest the store structure so much, but you can totally do it with ngrx-ducks if you want to. Okay. We have written our selectors, and now we want to display data in our component. And once again, we just use the store facade as our single point of contact with the store to provide a consumable stream that we can just bind to our view. And therefore, ngrx-ducks provides another helper method called bind selectors. And bind selectors can consume just need to do this import, and we can just import all selectors from the file, and then we pass the selectors here in this function. Okay, and the cool thing now is we can provide a count stream here in our component, and this will be an observable of number, I believe. And we can say this.count equals, and now we access our store facade, and it now has a property select, and it also has a property count. And as you can see, this is no selector anymore. This is a consumable observable of number. So you do not have to take care about writing this store pipe select, importing the selector. The facade dynamically provides you the stream data, and then you can just bind it. So maybe a new paragraph, and we can say we want to have this count, and we bind it with the async pipe. Okay, and now let's have a look if this works. And we already see the initial state here, which is nice. And now I can increase our count. It can also increase by 10, and it works. And this addresses the problem lots of Angular developers have claimed, that the decentralized nature of Redux makes you have to mutate the state, you have to use run API, and then to read some data, you have to use another API, and it's hard to bring those together. And ngrx-ducks bundles those functionality for you together. Yeah, and by the way, this bind selectors functionality also works with if you have a selector with parameters. So you can also have a parameterized selector, and ngrx-ducks will give you a function where you can pass the parameter, and this function then returns the consumable stream. Yeah. So this is basically it with the selector. And another cool, I just want to show this to you, because this was, when I saw this the first time, it was kind of mind-blowing to me. I just duplicate this selector, I call it count2, and now this really serves the open-close principle right? I touch the source code at one point, and I can benefit from it on another point without touching multiple code bases. So now the auto completion automatically gives you count 2, because the facade dynamically adds this functionality and passes it to your component. And I find this is a pattern that really scales when you enhance the read API of your store. And this without code generation, right? This is really just using the techniques of TypeScript itself. Yeah. So summary: a duck or a store facade can turn a selector into a ready-to-use consumable observable for you. And this is maybe it's kind of a summary how a duck or a store facade acts in the ecosystem. You have the actions. It takes care also about selectors, and what you get in your component is or are observables and self-dispatching actions. To use both, so both is addressed, the read API and the write API. It remains separated, but you can consume it via one service. So, and then there is another thing called get actions, because there are other things in the ngrx ecosystem that are not addressed by ngrx-ducks because they are just good, and the concept of the effects in ngrx just work. And what I have to do here with my library is to remain compatible with those mechanisms, because there are some mechanisms in ngrx that want or that need the pure actions, not the ducks, but the pure ngrx actions. And there are also helper methods that allow you to reuse those actions with a method called get actions. You need to pass the counter store facade token, and get actions will extract all the action creators of the class, and then you can use it anywhere else. Here's a example how it would look like in an effect. This is a normal effect service, and you have your counter effects here, and you can simply import the counter store facade, and then you can access the static property actions. So if you haven't seen this before, this property here is made static and read-only, because you do not need to inject the complete service. It is enough to just consume the actions here. And then you can just assign maybe a shortcut to it, and then you can work with those actions. And here you see the of-type operator of ngrx, and you can just use the ngrx-ducks converted or extracted actions, because these are pure ngrx actions. And inside of the effect as well, you can use those actions with a pure action creator as you already know it from ngrx. So you have not to relearn ngrx when you use ngrx-ducks. ngrx-ducks just supports you and makes you more effective in your all-day work. So I have a look at the time. I would skip the live coding for the effect for now, because I think it's pretty clear what get actions does and how it can be instrumented by the effect. I would show another thing though, because it was already questioned by the audience, and this is what is about state immutability. For those of you who are not familiar with the Redux, there are 3 golden rules in Redux, and one of them is that your state has to be read-only. And this means you cannot simply mutate the state. Maybe you have questioned why I have not said state.count equals state.count plus 1. This is because I have to create a new entire state. What is the reason for this? It's simply performance. All UI frameworks, let it be React, Vue, Angular, Aurelia, and so on and so on. They have a mechanism to track changes, and it is more simpler to find out the difference if something has changed when just the address in the cache has changed. So with a triple equal comparison. And that's why Redux just said, okay, then we make the state read-only to have this performance benefit. The problem with this is it's pretty hard to read, and you have to adopt your programming strategy a little bit, because you have to know about destructuring, and the code becomes a little bit more difficult to read though. And there are some projects out there that try to address this problem. One of those projects is called Immer.js, and Immer.js provides a wrapper for you that allows you to write just the code or mutation that you used to use, and it makes it immutable for you. And ngrx-ducks has a direct bridge to Immer.js. So ngrx-ducks can use Immer.js directly. So you can use another function called create mutable duck, and we can just refactor this and use create mutable duck. And what we can say here is, instead of this block of destructuring and reassigning the property, we can just say state.count plus plus, and here below we can say state.count plus payload. So as you can see, the code becomes more readable, right? There are less lines to parse. And when we go back here, we can say, okay, registration was successful, and the increase by function does not work. That's pretty interesting to me. Maybe I have to do something like this. No, I'm not sure why it does not work yet. Maybe I have discovered a bug while presenting. Yes, so maybe I did a mistake somewhere. So in Greece works. That's cool. But because I have to assign it, of course. Maybe someone has it is late in the evening, so of course I have to assign it, right? State.count equals to state.count plus payload, and now it should work. Yeah, that was I missed the assignment. Sorry for that. Yeah, so no bug report. All right, so maybe this also gives you a glimpse of what direction ngrx-ducks goes. So we really try to pimp the API to make state management as simple as possible here. So this is what I have for you today. There is a lot of things that are in the making, let's say. So with currently the version is ngrx-ducks 12. So I align the library versioning with Angular, because you know then what version of Angular is compatible with which version of ngrx-ducks. So it's always the same. And the next major release, I will do a little bit of name harmonization. So you have already noticed store Facade, the decorator, is cool. Yeah, it had lots of cool features, but Facade is a confusing name. So I will rename the decorator in the next major release. And also a few other helper functions to just align the naming a little bit. Then we will go and implement action auto prefixing. What is this? We already have the information about the feature name here in the decorator, but we need to manually pass it here in the actions yet. We will automate this, and by default, we will prefix each and every action with the feature name. And then you save also a little bit of time. And then we will start to implement ready-to-use concepts, UI and UX concepts. If you are familiar with ngrx entity, for example, it's a set of functions that help you to manage collections of entities. So in ngrx-ducks 13, we plan to provide in kind of a base class that already gives you all functions and all actions needed to implement all entity management, like set one, update one, upsert many. So all that you know from ngrx entity. And we will also provide another concept. This is the master detail view. So often you have a list of items and then you have a detail item, and then you have to manage which is my current item that I am about to update. And we will also provide a ready-to-use class for this that you can just plug it in, and then you can go and manage your master detail views out of the box and manage the state there. And this ideas of entity management and master detail view, I have this from the documentation of the state management solution called Akita. This is a very service and class and service oriented state management tool, and they already provide the entity management and master detail state management. And I think now it's a good idea to adopt this in ngrx-ducks, because we have now the store facade decorator, which allows us to do a lot of cool stuff with state management. And then we have one thing under consideration, and this is to generate actions by convention. This is a little bit more far away, I guess. Often in ngrx or in Redux, we have this initiating actions, success actions, and error actions. So you start loading products, then the products are loaded successfully, or there's an error while loading them. Often you have these three kinds of actions describing one asynchronous process. And we think about adding an API that allows to automatically add those three kinds of actions, just to save you more time by working with state management here. So if you want to give ngrx-ducks a try, I suggest just to install it or to visit the documentation page. The documentation page is linked in the GitHub profile, and there you will also find a lot of demo applications hosted on StackBlitz, just to get familiar with the API. So I will skip the summary because I guess I've mentioned a lot in this talk. But by the way, one thing I have not mentioned, ngrx-ducks also ships with schematics. So you can automatically generate a Duck service by using the Angular CLI if you like. Yeah, there are a few guys I want to thank here. So there is Marcel Heuer. He is also a developer here in Leipzig, and he introduced me to the Ducks pattern. I have no idea of this refactoring technique until he taught me this technique. And I just now for 2 years, I adopt this idea and bring this into the Angular ecosystem. Sasha Nusel, he is also working for Workshops.DE. He has created the nice looking logo for the library. And there is Thomas. He lives in Austria, and he created the schematics for ngrx-ducks. And there's also Wes Grimes, who has initially helped me with the slides here. So yeah, thank you very much to you guys. Then thanks for watching, and I hope you had a great time. And if you have any questions left, then you can just go ahead and ask them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for a great talk. It was amazing. YouTube seems so far as they don't have any questions.
So I see a question here in the Zoom chat. For unit testing, are there specific packages related to ngrx-ducks, or we should use ngrx testing packages? That's a good question. I think you can, of course, use ngrx testing packages because it seamlessly integrates itself with ngrx. And in the documentation page, you will find a few other methods that you can use. For example, there is a helper method called getReducer. So if you just want to unit test your reducer, you can take the store facade service, pass it to the getReducer function, and you just get the reducer function out of it, and then you can do unit testing with it. But it's a good point. It's not documented yet in the on Gitbook. I will add a unit test section to document the testing strategies with for ngrx-ducks. Good point, Ahmed. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes. Sorry. So while watching and following the talk, I got an idea that one of the advantages of ngrx-ducks is to reduce the code bulk rate. We don't have to specify like ngrx separated reducers with separated actions, with separated store. We can do all of this stuff in one file or one decorator definition.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and it also took me a while to get to this point. So the initial version of ngrx-ducks was better than the ngrx boilerplate, but there was a time in ngrx-ducks where it has used decorators for everything. So there was a add action decorator and so on and so on. But we went away from this because the lack of type safety, because decorators have not such a good type behavior like, for example, C# has with attributes. But then I came to this conclusion that a decorator makes sense to really do all the infrastructural stuff behind the scenes. So if you have something that does not need to be typed, then you can go ahead and use the decorator. And Angular really goes this way. It has a component decorator, it's just configuration. It's injectable decorator, it's just configuration. But it has no type impact of the class. And this idea, I think I had this idea just 3 months ago, that this is the right level where you can use a decorator to make things easier.
No, and it's currently supported by TypeScript version 4.4 about how to implement custom decorators.
So it is supported for a long time already. So
okay.
Yeah, so it's nothing new, it's nothing special, so you can add it right away. But I know there was a time, so in the early times of Angular, I guess, there was a time where you could not use custom decorators because the compiler has thrown them away. But I think it was Angular 2.x or something like this. But now you can go ahead and implement your own custom decorators and it's not vanished away by the compiler.
Okay. I have just one last question.
Yeah.
For state management tools and available alternatives. So there is ngrx, there is, as you mentioned, Akita, and there is also ngrx, xs, I think.
Exactly, yeah.
So, for example, if I will try to implement state management for my project, how can I make my choice, for example? Because what I know, also ngrx-s have the advantage of reducing the bulk rate more than ngrx.
Okay, that's a good question. There's also a new player in the house. I think Nathaniel Bazel has published a state management solution called ELF. It's
Okay.
funny because in German ELF is 11. And this is a more stream-oriented approach to manage state. So yeah, how can I answer this question? So I already tried Akita. I already work with, or I currently work with ngrx in my current project, and I also have used ngrx for a long time. And from my personal point of view, ngrx has the strongest API when it comes to separate write and read logic from each other. Because what you get from this separation is that you write more simpler code. If you use ngrx, for example, you are allowed to mix read and write side up again. And there is also a concept introduced in ngrx that is called asynchronous actions. So literally, ngrx does not use actions per se. It introduces the command pattern. And the difference between a command and an action is just fire and forget. And the command you receive if the command was successful or not. That's the difference in the API. And ngrx calls it action, but in fact it is a command. So it confuses a little bit the naming and of the patterns, of the communication patterns. And that's why I would go for ngrx because the separation of concerns by ngrx is the strongest one. And this is what I find very beneficial for a project. Nevertheless, all the other projects and state management solutions out there are great solutions. So we use ngrx also in a current productive project.
Okay, thanks for your answer.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Does anyone else have another question?
Not that I can see in the chat.
Yeah, me neither. Otherwise, thank you so much for your great talk. Thank you all for your great questions. Thank you for being here. And I hope everyone who watches the YouTube video likes it. And yeah.